already died in the sleep.
Okay. Yeah, we're on there.
Yeah. Zell has a notification show up when you go live.
Oh, yeah? He's a serious subscriber. Hardcore. Okay, so I'm gonna be honest with you. I really did not have time to prepare the class for tonight, so we're gonna wing it. Chapter 27.
No, it's okay.
Did you all hear that at the other end of the table?
Oh, that doesn't have to be.
We're winging it. We have no idea what's
Yeah.
going on today.
Chapter 27. Chapter 26. Chapter 26 comes right before chapter 27. I know that even without preparing.
Somewhere around one.
Get the non-Jewish answer.
That's it, one time.
Well, I'm on one.
We only got
It
through like
says
half
chapter
of it.
27. 115 says chapter 27.
116, really. We got through half of it last time, we didn't finish.
If you remember,
116. Yeah, 16 times better. 117. Is it the second chapter?
we're starting chapter 27.
Starting, but we only got through half.
No, last week we finished chapter 26.
Yeah.
Last class, you mean?
Yeah.
Last week.
Last class.
People are so orthodox, so literal.
Except
Right.
for level.
Open it up to opinions.
Right. Yeah, we're doing chapter 27. Chapter 26 was talking about what to do when there is interference. You know what you're supposed to be doing, you know what you want to be doing, but you have internal issues that prevent you or that get in the way, speed bumps. So until chapter 26, the Alter Rebbe kind of laid out for us this whole perspective on what's going on inside of us, with the two inclinations and the two souls, the godly soul and the animal soul. And when we feel like I know I shouldn't want this, but I do, and you wonder what's wrong with you, the Alter Rebbe kind of answers that in Tanya, saying that that's actually exactly how you were designed. You were designed with two souls, a godly soul and an animal soul, and what the godly soul wants, the animal soul has no interest in, and what the animal soul wants, the godly soul has no interest in. And that's why we feel like we have multiple personality syndrome, but really we just have ourselves. It's just us, and we're supposed to referee between those two inclinations. Of course, the Alter Rebbe went through a very long 25 chapters to get to this point. He explained a lot about the makeup of the soul, the elements, the four elements. Just like creation, there are the four elements, so too in the soul there are the four elements, and the various character traits, personality traits that we have come from those four elements. So we talked about the difference between the tzaddik and the Beinoni and the Rasha, the perfectly righteous individual versus the person who is available to sin. And then there's the person who would call the Beinoni, the one who would never actually transgress, but does have an evil inclination, does have an animal soul, and therefore has an appreciation for worldly pleasures, but doesn't succumb to them. And what we're supposed to do, the Alter Rebbe says, is we're supposed to strive for, at least minute by minute or day by day, strive to be, at least in the moment, Beinoni. Don't try to be a tzaddik. Don't try to be a saint, because you're not. Being a saint is a gift from above. And on your own, you shouldn't expect to get there. So better to try and become the Beinoni. That's part of what we talked about. So then, chapter 26, the Alter Rebbe says, what about when you have problems, internal issues like melancholy? The Alter Rebbe says, if if you have two people who are wrestling, now we know what's going on inside of us. We have this wrestling match going on inside of us where part of us wants to do the right thing, part of us wants to do the wrong thing. How do we make sure that we win and do the right thing? So the Alter Rebbe says, well, first and foremost, think of it as like a wrestling match. You can have a stronger opponent be beaten by a weaker opponent if the stronger opponent is sluggish or depressed or sad or melancholy or whatever, or lazy. So the first thing the Alter Rebbe says is you got to get over those mood swings. You got to get over the sadness. Sadness has no place in a good Jewish life. What about when you're struggling, when you have something to be sad about? So the Alter Rebbe divided that into two categories. One category is worldly matters, human affairs. You have sadness over human affairs, whatever they might be, legitimate, not frivolous. Family matters or livelihood matters or health issues, whatever they are. The Alter Rebbe says when it comes to those things, if you remember in the last class, when it comes to those things, he says you have to remind yourself that everything that comes from God is a blessing, and the things that happen in life that you don't see the blessing in, that means that it derives from a much higher source in the spiritual than those blessings that you do recognize. And that's a long conversation. We're not going to repeat that now, but good news is it's recorded. It's on the video. You can go back and look at it, or you can read the chapter. Then the other category is sadness over spiritual matters. And the Alter Rebbe said here, it's a little bit trickier because you can't convince yourself that, the problems aren't really problems. Really, it's a good thing. When you have troubles in your livelihood, so you're struggling, you can say somehow there's a hidden blessing in here. If you're struggling spiritually, you can't say somewhere there's a hidden blessing. Struggling spiritually means I did something I shouldn't have done. I chose to eat the cheeseburger. You can't say, well, somewhere hidden in that there's a blessing. No, it's just a mistake. So if I'm sad over that, if I'm feeling disappointed with myself and I'm sad over that, what do I do? The Alter Rebbe said for that you have to have a whole different set of solutions. The first possible solution is you have to recognize that sadness isn't the answer anyways. Even if there's really a problem, sadness isn't the answer, because you're supposed to serve God with joy. And say you're in the middle of your praying and you're thinking about your shortcomings and now you're sad about it, you ruin the mood and you're not serving God with joyfully anymore. So that's not an appropriate time to be thinking about this stuff. What if you're in the middle of your work day, you're in the middle of doing your regular, human activities, and suddenly you find yourself all depressed over your lowly spiritual state? The Alter Rebbe says that's not the right thing either, because the only way you would get upset over some spiritual shortcoming, good to know. The only way you get sad over a spiritual shortcoming is if you contemplate on the greatness of God and awaken the love that you have for God in your heart. And why are you doing that in the middle of your workday? So obviously, the sadness that you're feeling is just another way that your animal instinct gets you to be sad. Why does your animal instinct want you to be sad?
Because when you said you give you the right to do whatever you want.
Yeah, not because it likes feelings, because sadness is the absence of feeling.
Sadness is a feeling.
Sadness is the numbing to feeling. Sadness is when you numb yourself to feeling. So it's when you feel less. That's sadness. When you're feeling less, you're more you're more likely to go seeking pleasure. And then you're easy to trip up. Your animal instinct has a much better chance at getting you to do something that in your right mind you wouldn't do. But if you're feeling sad, you want anything pleasurable because you're not feeling very good right now. So
Well, I will keep going.
that was last week's class.
What?
This is all last week's class.
Okay. I better get with the program.
So those are the two possibilities in sadness over spiritual matters. The Alter Rebbe says if you really want to be sad over spiritual shortcomings, you have to designate a specific time. There is a right time for it, and there is a right place for it, but not when it's instinctual, not when it's automatic, not when it's thoughts just come to you when you're sad about your spiritual state. That's never going to be a good thing. You want to be sad about your spiritual state. You want to do something about the fact that you're not serving God properly. Decide when you're going to think about it. For example, when you do the Shema prayer before bed at night, and then when you intended to have these sad feelings over your sad, lowly state of, spiritual state of being, then that sadness will lead to productivity and improvement and benefit. And he says that's what the quote that we had from Tanakh, from King Solomon, that says, from sadness comes a benefit. That's the sadness he was talking about. The sadness that has a benefit after it is the sadness that you intended and you planned and you meditated on something that's really worth being sad over, not just random. Okay. That was 25. 26. Now we're up to 27. Chapter 27 says as follows. Let me just, by way of preface, of introduction, remember, back in chapters 13, 14, he was talking about, we'll just get into it and we'll talk about it when we get to it. What about a case where the worries that you have are not over any sins that you've committed, because you don't commit sins? You're the Beinoni. Beinoni doesn't commit sin, right?
Sure. You.
Not me.
So all of us around this, we're all Beinoni, or even in a moment of Beinoni-dom, Beinoni-hood, whatever, a Beinoni moment. In other words, you're upset about a spiritual shortcoming that does not involve sin. What is a spiritual shortcoming that does not involve sin? That is having inappropriate thoughts. I think I'm going to cheat on my taxes. Very inappropriate. You haven't actually cheated on your taxes. You're just thinking about it. But the thought of a sin is also a problem. So he says, right. Ella, rather, from bad thoughts and inappropriate desires, that fall into your head, that just pop up in your mind. Hine. If you're having these instinctual, I don't know what the right word is, these automatic thoughts, these Ella be'es. I'm sorry, if you're having these thoughts not during the time of prayer or serving God, rather you're having these thoughts when you're in the middle of your own personal human activities, you're in the middle of business, you're tending to the landscaping or whatever you're doing. So then on the contrary, you should rejoice in your lot. Because although they pop into your head, you're able to remove your mind from them, to fulfill the commandment in the Torah where it says, we say it in the Shema, do not go astray after your heart and after your eyes that lead you astray. Your heart and your eyes lead you astray. So if you never had any inappropriate thought, how would you ever fulfill the mitzvah of don't be led astray by your heart? In other words, the fact that we have natural thoughts that are inappropriate, that we don't appreciate, is part of the design. It's so that we can fulfill that mitzvah of don't be led astray by your feelings. If you never had any feelings that you didn't intend to have, you would never be able to fulfill that mitzvah. So the fact that we have that mitzvah in the Torah tells you that it's perfectly natural and it's expected that you're going to have thoughts that you need to avoid. Right? And the verse is obviously not talking to the saints. To refer to them as those who go astray. They don't go astray. They're the tzaddik. They're the saint. Rather, it's the Beinani and similar to the Beinani. Who's similar to the Beinani? You and me. You have lewd thoughts that just show up involuntarily, whether they're thoughts that are of activities that are permissible or not. And when you remove your mind from those thoughts, you fulfill this prohibition, this negative mitzvah of not going astray after your mind. Huh? Lo tatur, right. The Amr Razal. Now here's the interesting thing. The sages say, Yoshav v'loy avar aveira, one who sits and does not commit a sin, noisnim loy schar ki'ilo asa mitzvah. In heaven, that is rewarded just like if you had actually gone and done an active mitzvah. So you could think that doing a mitzvah is really powerful. Not sinning, well, that's just baseline. There's nothing special there. That's just baseline. That's not how the Torah sees it. The Torah sees it that when you refrain from a sin, that's actually a mitzvah, just like any other mitzvah. And therefore, you have to rejoice in the fulfillment of this negative mitzvah, say mamash, just like you rejoice with the fulfillment of any other mitzvah, any of the positive mitzvahs.
So you go, yay, I didn't cheat on my taxes.
Yes. Yay, I had the opportunity to deny myself an inappropriate desire. Exactly. There's this great story, I tell it very often because I think it's a great story, as I just mentioned, of the two holy brothers, that Rabbi Zusia and Rabbi Elimelech were traveling together. I've told this story a bunch of times in this class. They're traveling together and they end up they're incognito. It was a thing back then in those days where the super holy people would go into self-imposed exiles, where they would travel to where they're unknown and they're not recognized and live the life of the simple folk.
Where was this?
In Ukraine,
Oh.
probably. I'm guessing, not Siberia. Anyway, that's what they would do. Many of the tzaddikim, they were the hidden tzaddikim, the tzaddikim that nobody knew that they were righteous. But once their cover was blown and everybody knew who they were, they still longed for the anonymous life where they could serve God without the honor and the pomp and circumstance. So they would do that. They would send themselves into these self-imposed exile. Anyway, so the story is that they were hanging out with all the beggars of a particular town, and for whatever reason, everybody got rounded up and put into a prison cell overnight. This whole group of peasants, and so you have these two very holy rabbis who are in this big open, big communal jail cell where all you have in the room is a bunch of Cossacks, a bunch of riffraff, and these two holy men, and the only other thing in the room is a chamber pot, a bucket used for as a bathroom. So the sun is going down, and Rabbi Elimelech starts to cry. He was the older brother, more serious. Reb Zusia was the more joyful, the younger, more joyful brother. And the younger brother, Reb Zusia, asked Reb Elimelech, "Why are you crying?" And Reb Elimelech says, "Because this is going to be the first time, and as far back as I can remember, that I'm not going to be able to do the nighttime prayer, because you're not allowed to pray in the presence of filth." And he's devastated that he's not going to be able to do his afternoon prayer or whatever. So his brother says, I don't understand why you're crying. Why do you pray every day? Because God told you to. Why are you not going to pray today? Because God told you to. So why do you care how you serve God? Just serve him however he wants you to. So the thought brought so much joy to his older brother, the idea that he was going to get to serve God in a way that he never served God before. He got up and danced. The two brothers are dancing together. Anyway, the end of the story is that the guards came by and wanted to know what was making those Jews so happy, because we don't want Jews being happy. And the other folks in the room said, I don't know, they were speaking Yiddish to each other, had something to do with the pot. So just to stick it to the Jews, they removed the pot to get rid of their source of joy. So they were able to do the prayer. That's the story. But the point of the story is, what do you care how you're serving God? Your job is to serve God. Rejoice in the fact that you have an opportunity to serve God. So if you're serving God by lighting your Hanukkah candles, you love doing that. You rejoice over that. If you're serving God by having a kosher dinner, you love that. Now you're going to serve God by not doing something that you want to do. So rejoice over that in the same way. What's the difference? Which mode of serving God is asking you for right now? If you're really in this to serve him, then you should be perfectly content with whatever version of service is available to you. That's the idea. So you should rejoice when you have a thought, a thought of sin, and you have to refrain, you have to put an effort to not actually commit the sin. You should rejoice over that opportunity. Now, continuing, I don't know what page you're on there because I have a different book. Va'adar Abba, right by the little symbol on the side of the page for the third of Adar.
117 or 118?
He says, on the contrary, ha'atzvus hi megasas haruach. Where is this sadness coming from? You're sad that you're having inappropriate thoughts? Where's that sadness coming from? He says the sadness is coming from arrogance. The sadness over having inappropriate thoughts, you're disappointed with yourself that you're having an inappropriate thought. That's just arrogance. Why is it arrogance? You don't recognize your own place. You don't recognize where you're at. And you're fretting over the fact that you're not a tzaddik, you're not a saint. Because a tzaddik certainly doesn't have these types of thoughts. So if I'm having the thoughts of, woe is me that I'm having inappropriate thoughts, it's ki ilu hoya makir mekoyma, if I would recognize my place, admit to myself that I'm very distant from the level of a tzaddik, and if only I could just be a beinani, v'loy rasha, and not sinful, kol yoma v'afilu sha'achas, even just one moment all my days, or even just one moment. This is the work of the beinani and the service that they're supposed to engage in. To conquer the negative, the animal instinct, the evil inclination, and these thoughts that come up from the heart into your mind, and to remove your mind from them, and to push them away with both hands. Now, this is what the introduction I was going to give at the beginning, and here's where it would have come in. You remember back in chapter 13 and 14, we were talking about the difference between the Beinoni and the Tzaddik. So it was a very subtle difference. When we commit a sin, we're on the level of Russia, right? That's just the sinful person. But if you never sin, are you Beinoni? The answer is, I'm sorry, if you never sin, are you tzaddik? Are you a saint? The answer is no, because it depends on your desires. If you have desires for that other than what God wants, then you're not a tzaddik, you're not a saint. if you're not sinning, you could be a Beinoni. Question is, why aren't you sinning? Is it because you just have no desire to sin? You're lazy? You'd rather read a book? Or is it because you're trying to avoid sin?
But also just to read a book that is not a Torah, it's also
Right.
a chet.
Right. Or if you want to just read the Torah, you enjoy reading Torah, it's fascinating to you. So you're not serving God, right? You're not actually putting in any effort. But here's the question. The only way to know for sure is to know what you're feeling. But the Alter Rebbe said back there in chapters 13 and 14, if you remember, he said sometimes even the Beinoni can think he might be a tzaddik because it feels like his evil inclination is gone, has no desire for anything other than. But that's only because he's so constantly engaged in holy things that your animal instinct doesn't have a chance to catch his breath. Can't get in a word in edgewise. So it seems on the surface that this is a tzaddik, but it's not a tzaddik because the evil inclination is just what he referred to back in chapter 13 is asleep. But the minute he stops doing these mitzvahs, that evil inclination is there, ready to voice its opinion. And that's how he answered the question of how is it possible that Rabbah, the great Rabbah in the Talmud, said, for example, I'm a Beinoni, I'm the average guy. How could he have made that mistake? He was one of the greatest sages ever. The answer is because he was constantly studying Torah. If you're constantly studying Torah, how do you know if your evil inclination will pop up when you stop studying Torah, if you never stop? How do you know? There's only one way to find out, and that is to stop studying Torah. And he didn't want to stop studying Torah. In other words, there are all these various levels. How do you know what level you're at? Well, if you're having a negative thought, we know you're not the tzaddik. If you're having a negative thought and you're aware of the negative thought, we know you're not even the higher level Beinoni. If you're having a negative thought and you're aware of it, you're at best mid-level Beinoni. I mean, if only we could all be that even for a moment, right? But he's saying you're actually very far from ever becoming a tzaddik. You're only mid-level, but you're not even the high-level Beinoni. You're kind of mid-level, you know. In other words, he's saying, imagine the pauper that sitting on the street panhandling because he can't afford to buy himself lunch yet, and he's thinking, "Oh, if only I had the Rolls Royce." That's inappropriate. That's not regret. That's fantasizing. The panhandler who needs money for lunch is regretting that he can't afford lunch. He's not regretting that he can't afford a Rolls Royce. If he's thinking, "Oh, I wish I could afford a Rolls Royce,"
To be angry in the Rolls Royce, then be angry in the street, no?
So that
one second. The point is, be realistic. Understand the difference between regret and just fantasizing. The poor man doesn't regret not having a Rolls. He fantasizes about having a Rolls Royce. That's not the same as regret. So you and me, when we're having these negative thoughts and we think, "Oh, if only I could not have negative thoughts." No. That's wishing for the Rolls Royce. You're just fantasizing. You're not being realistic. Don't fantasize over having a Rolls Royce. Don't fantasize over never having a negative thought. You're nowhere near there. Be realistic. Back down to earth. What you should a 1965 bug. What you should be wishing for, what you should be regretting is that you pursued the thought when it popped into your mind. You can't regret the fact that you had the thought. You can only regret pursuing the thought, entertaining the thought, because that's something that's within your realm of control. But you're going to sit there and be all pious and say, "Oh, woe is me, I had a negative thought." Who do you think you are, Moses? Back down to earth. Don't fantasize over a Rolls Royce. You're not being realistic.
So is it a sin to fantasize about a Rolls Royce?
No.
what about the flying car?
So what if it leads to sadness? Is that nothing?
Yes, that's a problem. If it leads to
Is
sadness,
that the same as repelling other emotions?
well, sadness is.
I mean, numbing, is that the same as repelling?
Numbing is
Yeah.
the reaction to sadness, which is a feeling.
We can debate that.
We will.
Say
Okay.
that again.
Sadness is the absence of feeling. It's not a feeling.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a study where it shows sensations and emotion.
Yeah.
And the only emotion, there's an absence of feeling, sensation in your body when you go into depression or sadness.
Yeah, there's no question that sadness is when you want to stop feeling, you want to curl up into a ball and do nothing. If you were feeling something, you'd be agitated. There are different feelings. Sadness isn't, anyway.
So is the
We'll have to get
level
into
of sadness that leads to numbness? Because there's also.
No,
a state of
sadness
now-
is, from the study, I'm not saying it's true. From the study, there's just an absence of sensation.
Ask any more questions, you're going to charge your
No, I just
insurance
mean,
company.
like, so overwhelmed with sadness.
What?
There's a state of numbness where you're just so numb, your body's so overwhelmed.
I'll send it to you.
Okay, yeah, thanks.
It's
Okay,
just a
so-
study.
So that's the idea. So now that's what he's saying here. He's saying if you're feeling sad over, where's the sadness coming from? You say, well, I'm not sad over the fact that I don't make enough money. I'm sad over the fact that I'm not holy enough. Why are you sad about that? Well, because I had this inappropriate thought and that's not nice. I shouldn't have had that. What are you getting sad about? You're getting sad because you're a little too arrogant. You think that you're able to be Moses, but you're not.
So being sad is a sin?
Sad, it's actually an interesting thing. Sadness isn't a sin, but it's said, there's an expression that says sadness is not a sin, but it's worse than any sin.
It says מצווה גדולה להיות בשמחה.
Right. Being sad is like
Not fun.
it's a lot of fun.
It's not. No.
It's not fun.
It's not.
What
No.
about authentic sadness?
So it's worse than all sins?
It's worse than sin because it
It creates, makes you sin
it
more.
creates sin and it prevents tshuva. So it's like you're just trapped in your own sadness. You can never
But you can't have happiness without sadness either.
gonna disagree. I'm gonna disagree with that too. You can have different levels of happiness. And sadness is not really the opposite of happiness. You can be neutral. Anyway, let's get back into the Tanya. Now, he's saying not only should you not be sad over the fact that you have these feelings that introduce themselves into your head, because you have the opportunity to fulfill the mitzvah of not following your feelings, which is one of the 613 mitzvahs of the Torah, right?
Yeah.
By the way, because I mentioned that, you know that the Rebbe instituted 45 years ago the study of Maimonides, Rambam's codification of Jewish law. So there have been 45 years now where we study the Rambam in an annual cycle. We go through the entire 14 volumes of Rambam's Code of Jewish Law. Yad HaChazakah. Either in a 3-year cycle or in a 1-year cycle. And if at minimum, we read the mitzvah of the day, which is whatever mitzvahs apply to the chapters that are being studied that day, the chapter or chapter. So the reason I mention is because we just finished the cycle 2 days ago. We finished the 45th cycle and we started the 46th cycle, if I'm not mistaken. And before you get into chapter 1, Maimonides has an introduction to his whole set, which we did yesterday. And then he lists all of the positive mitzvahs, 248 positive mitzvahs, and then all the 365 negative mitzvahs, prohibitions. And then you start chapter 1. Today's portion of Rambam study was reading off all 248 positive mitzvahs. And tomorrow we read off all 365 negative mitzvahs. And then the day after tomorrow, we start the actual chapters, which means the reason I'm mentioning is because if you want to do something really, really holy, a really good thing to do is to jump in on this annual cycle of study. It's very simple. It's super easy to do. There are classes online. You can, you do the long version, the three chapters. You can do the short version, 1 chapter. You can even just hear what the mitzvah of the day is, listen to what it is. So one of the mitzvahs is don't follow your heart and your eyes. Don't be led astray by your heart and your eyes. That's why I mentioned that.
I just want to say it was in my inbox today. If
Yeah.
anyone wants to read.
It's
Yeah, yeah.
very interesting
Very
because
holy.
they tell you you should listen to your heart.
Who tells you?
All these people.
Who is those
That
people?
guy. Who was that? Whose song was that?
That guy, we don't listen to him to begin with. But Stam.
Brian Adams? Yeah.
No,
Don't follow that. Yeah.
no, like New Age stuff is about listening.
80s song.
New Age stuff is, you want to sum up New Age stuff? I can sum it up in one phrase.
Please do.
Decision that.
You might get canceled in Santa Cruz.
You want to get canceled? Here is a definition of New Age life.
Yeah.
You be your idol.
You be your
You be your idol.
what's I
So that's
I don't-
following your heart.
don't.
Elohim achirim.
Mm.
No, not dugma. Tselem, like a other god. Avodah zarah.
That's what happens when
You
you
be
follow
your
your
own-
heart, really.
Yeah, I'm going to follow my heart means what I feel is most important.
Right.
What
How do you
mature
know what
person
you're
would ever?
feeling?
Or that God is.
You have to talk to a therapist a lot. Why do you think they make so much money? Because everybody is following their heart.
And the heart says every day something else.
Good.
They should be following Torah instead.
They should be following their mind, even if you're not going to follow Torah yet. At least let your heart follow your
You
mind.
don't always trust.
The definition of maturity. You certainly shouldn't trust your heart. If you don't trust your mind, do not leave it up to your
What
heart.
if you conflate your mind and your heart? What if they're so intertwined you can't tell the difference?
You gotta-
only have Torah to follow.
You got to see somebody about that.
You're telling us we're all sick, we have to see.
We're all
Oh,
sick.
there's no question.
No, we don't have to study Tanya.
Right. Yeah, you can save a lot of money in therapy by studying Tanya.
Right.
Okay, back into the Tanya, so we can save some more money. Ubechol dechia udechia, with every time you push away these inappropriate thoughts, shemadcheu imachshavta, when you push it away from your mind, eskafia sitra achalatata, you bend, you subdue the unholiness and bend it down. You subjugate, you. And then ubesarusa delatatu ubesarusa delaela, because you do that, you initiate that process of putting God before yourself. God responds to you, and God does the same thing by subduing unholiness from above. Hamagbiat makanesher, which the unholiness tries to raise itself up like an eagle, but you can push it down, l'kayim mashakosef, to fulfill that which, as it says, im tagbia kanesher regomer misham oiditcha nu'um Hashem. A verse of the Torah: if the unholiness raises itself up, God will bring it down. When will God bring it down? He will bring it down when you do your part first. Then God will help with the rest. Which basically means a general rule, like that Mishnah that says, the quote in the Mishnah that says, "It is not your task to finish the job, but you are not free to desist from participating." Right? The idea is, God knows that you're not able to do everything, and yet He's asking you for everything because you're supposed to do as much as you possibly can, and then God will bridge the gap between your ability and totality. That's God's job, not your job. Like it says in the Zohar. Here's a little piece of Zohar. If you ever wanted to learn some Kabbalah, here we get it, straight up Kabbalah. Daf Kuf Chaf, you want to look it up in the Zohar, you can look it up. It's on page 128. He says, about the greatness of the pleasure that God gets, when you make the unholiness bow, when you subdue the unholiness, he says, the glory of God is raised up above all else, more than with any other praise, any other benefit. And this is the greatest kind of, in other words, what the Zohar says is, you think that when you do a positive mitzvah, that's better than when you deny yourself a prohibition. It's the opposite. The pleasure that God gets is greater when you deny yourself a prohibition in Torah than it is when you actually engage in a mitzvah. Why? I'm glad you asked. He doesn't explain it. He doesn't explain it here. But if you think about it, just on a practical level, when I fulfill a mitzvah, how much of it is about God and how much of it is about me? No, it depends on my level of devotion to God, you know.
And
Think
also
of-
depend on the mitzvah.
Yeah, but think of it in the context of a regular relationship. I'm married, I have a wife. When I do something for my wife, how much of it is for her and how much of it is for me to feel good about the fact that I did something nice for my wife?
Depends what it is and when.
But one thing is for sure. When I don't do something because she doesn't like it, there's a lot less
It's only
me
for her.
there
Yeah.
than when I do something, right? If I don't do something that I want to do, but I'm not going to because she doesn't want me to, that's straight up humility.
So
Whereas when I do something she wants, that could be I'm being a good husband, I'm being a good guy, right?
it's easier to give than to give up.
Yes, because when you give, you feel alive, you feel yourself. So the pleasure that God gets when you simply say, God is more important than me, and therefore I'm not going to do what it is I want to do, that's far greater. In other words, the relationship between me and God, from God's perspective, is deepened and is sweetened far more when I deny myself my own pleasures than it is when I give him his pleasure. That makes sense? So again, when I have a thought that I shouldn't have, I really want to cheat on my taxes this year, but I deny myself that pleasure, the perverse pleasure of cheating on my taxes.
Is it a really sin?
Yeah, it's called stealing.
No, but it's טעות תקין, no?
You're not stealing from God,
No.
you're stealing from a man-made convention, which isn't God, so how bad?
They're stealing from us.
Yeah.
גונב מגנב.
Like I said, back in the Tanya, loopholes are our favorite thing.
Yeah.
If you can do it legally, all more power to you.
Get a goy to do your taxes on Shabbos. Do whatever you want.
Very, very well played. Well played. Well played.
Do find it. Okay.
Rabbis are if they're not good at loopholes, they're not good at anything.
Okay.
No, loopholes are very
You were
important.
giving me work there.
Loopholes are extremely important as long as they're kosher loopholes,
Oh,
right?
of course, sure.
Like carrying a key on your belt on Shabbos. I mean, come on, that's an obvious loophole, right? Or is that a belt hole? All right. The point is that when you're having an inappropriate thought, like cheating on your taxes, and you deny yourself that, don't be disappointed that you had that thought. On the contrary, you just stumbled upon an opportunity to give God a tremendous compliment, which is, I want this, you don't. I'm going to do it your way. That's amazing. That's a tremendous mitzvah.
So Rabbi,
Why?
when you think about cheating on
That
your
tone.
taxes, how do you divert your thoughts?
I'm on live internet here. I'm not going to talk about that. What was your question?
Was my question.
What was it? I didn't-
When you thought you're not supposed to have. And I mean, yeah, there's the process of, I'm not gonna do it, but where does your mind go? Where should your mind? What should you be thinking about or doing about?
Where your mind
Should
should
do
go.
it a different though.
To a different sin? What?
No, different though.
Different
About
thought.
something else, something that you're allowed to think about.
So he just told you what you're supposed to think. You're supposed to think, wow, I have an opportunity to serve God by putting his will before my own.
Mm.
That's where it's supposed to go.
Okay, that makes, yeah.
Where does it go? Depends on the day. You know, humans are
Depends on the
humans.
season of the year.
Depends on the season. If it's not tax season and I have that thought, I'm okay.
Like you can play it out, like honestly, like you can play it out like this is not what God wants, but it's also like, well, if I do cheat on my taxes, then the money's going take from somebody else in
Yeah.
some other way, and
Yeah,
somebody else is gonna
being-
be in a bad place.
yeah, being convoluted and clever is probably not a good idea. Because
For
that,
anybody.
yeah,
Yeah.
unless you're paid to do that, unless you're the rabbi and you're supposed to find a way, to create loopholes or whatever. But to make it more realistic,
Yeah.
you wake up in the morning, you slept in, you look at the clock, it's 9:40. You're thinking, oh gosh, I know that you got to recite the morning Shema before 9:43. Oh, can I get up and do the Shema before 9:43, or should I just pretend like I didn't wake up and go back to sleep and at 11 o'clock say, oh shoot, I forgot the Shema. I have a real dilemma. No, you got to get out of bed. You got to do the Shema. You got to wash your hands and say the blessing on the washing of the hand, and then say the Shema
Say Shema outside of the night.
in the morning. The
I
morning
know.
Shema. So there are very practical examples of, you're running really late and it's almost Shabbos, and it's 5:47 is the deadline, and you're at 5:46 and you get to you turn off the light and it's 5:47 and a half, and should I pretend like I didn't notice? Should I do it?
You have 18 minutes, you good.
No, I'm talking about the 18 minutes. So there are all these all these scenarios where you know what the right thing to do is, but you really want to just try to, you want to get through the intersection when the light is still yellow, but you know that it was really red, that feeling. You have that in the spiritual sense. What do? What you do is you say, I know what I want, but I also know what's right. I'm going to set aside what I want and I'm going to do what's right. If you can do that, that gives Hashem tremendous joy because you put him ahead of yourself. It's amazing. That's amazing.
So what is the
Fantastic.
reason for not cheating on your taxes just because you're afraid of the law? You're not afraid of God.
So actually, we had in Tanya earlier, a number of chapters ago, where there was this quote from the Talmud, where there was a sage in the Talmud, one of my favorite quotes, because it's a sage named Rabbi Yochanan, who was famous for saying to his students, halavai, which means like, if only your fear of God was at least like your fear of your fellow human. In the sense that when you know you're about to do something wrong, you look around to see if anybody's looking. So at least fear God that much. So yeah, it's, it is what it is. You have that fear of other people catching you doing something wrong because that's supposed to help you become aware of, or perhaps that's why God made it that way, so that it helps us become aware of how we should feel towards God. Getting caught doing something wrong is a terrible feeling. Terrible, terrible feeling. In fact, I don't want to say this in front of your son, but one of the things that my father taught me when I was beginning my parenting career is he said, never catch your child doing something wrong. Because there's nothing to be gained in that situation. Child goes into defense mode and there's nothing you can do to be useful or helpful. Or he says, in fact, if you walk into a room and you see your child doing something wrong, turn around on your heels and get out of the room before they notice you were there. Don't let your child know that you caught them. Why? Because when you're busted, your intellect, your intelligence shuts down. You go into defense mode, and you're not a rat. The same thing is with when the police lights go on behind you, and you see the red and blue flashing lights. That feeling that you get, like
Can't relate.
like you're about to get your arm amputated or something. Nothing's going to happen. It's going to cost you $200 and 3 points on your license. What are you panicking for? Oh no, it's terrible. Why? Because you were caught doing something you shouldn't do. If you could just think about that every time you do something you shouldn't do, God is right there. It's not like you can hide that from God, can't you? Yeah. Everybody else is. Nobody asked permission.
Tell your dad, so when do you confront your child about the wrongdoing? Does it ever get,
You talk about it in theory sometime later.
You bring it up.
You teach a lesson. Don't say, I saw that you did whatever. You just say, this idea that there are people who sometimes do whatever is really terrible. And people shouldn't do that. But you have nothing to gain by making the child feel defensive.
Yeah.
Or anybody,
Or anybody. Yeah.
anytime.
Right. V'lochen, and therefore, al yipelev adam alav, a person should never become sad And don't become bitter. Even if you recognize, you discover that this is basically your story for the rest of your life. You're always going to be the guy who struggles, spiritually in this case. Sorry. Because maybe that's exactly why you were created. This is your service, to subdue the unholiness.
What is subdue?
Dachnia? That's the right word? Now, here's another question that we had at the beginning of Tanya, for those of you who were here right at the beginning. He asked, how can it say in the book of Job, you create, is it in the book of Job, or is it spoken in the name of? The Talmud says that Job asks God, says to God, you created the righteous, you created the wicked. And the Alter Rebbe says, what do you mean you created the righteous and created the wicked? That means there's no free choice?
Mhm.
You decided who's going to be righteous and who's going to be wicked? So back in chapter 14, the Alter Rebbe explained how it could say you created the righteous, because being a tzaddik really is a gift from God. That level of piety, that's a gift from God. But what about you created the wicked? How could God say that? I mean, how could Eov say God created the wicked? Don't you have free choice? So he says, this is the answer to that question. It doesn't mean that God is creating people to be wicked. That's not what it means. Heaven forfend. Rather, what it means is that they're challenged with Russia-like experiences in their thoughts alone. God plants thoughts in your mind that are thoughts of wicked people. That doesn't mean you're wicked. It means you're experiencing a wicked person moment. Now, what are you going to do with it? That's what you created the wicked means. Veheim yiyu nilchamim tamid, and these average people, the you and me folks, will struggle with this, will battle with this constantly. Lasiach daita mehem, to remove their minds from it, to subdue the unholiness. They will never, this average kind of person will never be able to completely rid themselves of unholiness, because that's the wheelhouse of the tzaddik, of the saint. The rest of us get to struggle our whole lives. Sit back and relax. Get used to it. This is us. I thought maybe we'd be able to get through the whole chapter tonight, but I don't think we're going to make it. So I think we'll leave it at that for tonight. Chapter 27.2, part 2, coming next week.
Right. Good winging.
Huh?
Good winged it.